Input tax credit, section 16 to 21. Section 16, eligibility and condition for taking input tax. Subsection 1, every registered person shall subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be prescribed and in the manner specified in the section 49 be entitled to take credit of input tax charge on any supply of goods or services or both to him which are used or intended to be used in the course of furtherance of business, and the said amount shall be credited to electronic credit ledger of such person. Subsection 2. Notwithstanding anything contained in this section, no registered person shall be entitled to the credit of any input in tax in respect of any goods, supply of goods or services or both to him unless he is in possession of tax invoice or debit note issued by the supplier registered under this act or such other tax paying document as may be prescribed. The details of the invoice or the debit note referred to in Class A has been furnished by the supplier in the statement of outward supplies, and such details have been communicated to the recipient of the such invoice or debit note in the manner specified under the section 37. He has received the goods or services or both. Explanation: for the purpose of this class, it shall be deemed that the registered person has received the goods or, as the case may be, services, where the goods are delivered by the supplier to a recipient or any other person on the direction of the such registered person, whether acting as an agent or otherwise, before or during the movement of goods, either by way of transfer of documents of the title to the goods or otherwise, where the services are provided by the supplier to any person on the direction of or on account of such registered person. The details of input tax rate in respect of the said supply communicated to such registered person under the section 38 has been restricted subject to the provision of the section 41. The tax charge in respect of the such supply has been actually paid to the government either in cash or through utilization of input tax credit admissible in respect of the said supply, and he has furnished the returns under the section 39, provided that where the goods against an invoice are received in lots or installments, the registered person shall be entitled to take credit upon the receipt of the last lot or installment. Provided further that where a recipient fails to pay to the supplier of the goods or services or both, other than the supplies on which the tax is payable on the reverse charge basis, the amount towards the value of supply, along with tax payable thereon, within a period of 180 days from the date of issue of invoice, the supplier an amount equal to the input tax rate availed by the recipient shall be paid by him along with interest payable under the section 50 in such manner as may be prescribed, provided also that the recipient shall be entitled to avail the credit of input tax on the payment made by him to the supplier of the amount towards the value of supply of goods or services or both, along with the tax payable thereon. The explanation: for the purpose of this class, it shall be deemed that the registered person has received the goods where the goods are delivered by the supplier to the recipients or any other person on the direction of the such registered person, whether acting as an agent or otherwise, before or during the movement of the goods, either by way of transfer of documents of the title to the goods or otherwise. Subsection 3. The where the registered person has claimed the depreciation on the tax component of the cost of capital goods and the plant and machinery under the provisions of the Income Tax Act 1961, the input tax rate on said tax component shall not be allowed. Subsection 4. A registered person shall not be entitled to take input tax rate in respect of any invoice or debit note for the supply of goods or services or both after the 30 days of the November following the end of financial year to which such invoice or debit note pretends or furnishing of the relevant annual returns, whichever is earlier, provided that the registered person shall be entitled to take the credit after the due date of furnishing of the return under the section 39 for the month of September 2018 till the due date of furnishing of the return under the said section for the month of March 2019 in respect of any invoice or invoice relating to such debit note for the supply of goods or services or both made during the financial year 1718, the details of which has been uploaded by the supplier under the subsection 1 of the section 37 till the due date for furnishing the details under the subsection 1 of the said section for the month of March 2019. March 2019. Substituted for the words due date of furnishing the return under the section 39 for the month of September. September. Up, apportion Section 17, apportionment of credit and block credit. Subsection 1, where the goods or services or both are used by this registered person partly for the purpose of any business and partly for any other uh, purpose, the amount of credit shall be restricted to so much of the input tax credit as is attributable to the purpose of his business. Subsection 2, where the goods or services or both are used by registered person partly for effecting the taxable supplies, including the zero rated supplies under this act or under the Integrated Goods and Service Tax Act, and partly for effecting the exempt supplies under the said acts, the amount of credit shall be restricted to so much of the input tax as is attributable to the said taxable supplies, including the zero rated supplies. Subsection 3. The value of input exempt supply under the subsection 2 shall be such as may be prescribed and shall include the supplies on which the recipient is liable to pay tax on the reverse charge basis, the transactions in the securities sale of land and subject to the clause B of this paragraph 5 of the schedule 2 sale of building. Explanation for the purpose of this subsection, the expression value of exempt supply shall not include the value of activities or the transactions specified in the Schedule 3. The value of activities or the transactions specified in the paragraph 5 of the said schedule and the value of such activities or the transactions as may be prescribed in respect of the class A of the paragraph 8 of the said schedule. Uh, the central government, the mm, Subsection 4, a banking company or the financial institution, including the non-banking financial institution company, engage in supplying the services by way of accepting the deposit, extending the loans or advances shall have the option to either comply with the provisions of the subsection 2 or avail of every month an amount equal to 50% of the eligible input tax rate on the inputs capital goods and the input services in the month, and the rest shall lapse provided that the options once exercised shall not be withdrawn during the remaining part of the financial year, provided further that the restriction of 50% shall not apply to the tax paid on the supplies made by one registered person to another registered person having the same permanent account number. Subsection 5. Notwithstanding anything contained in the subsection 1 of the section 16 and subsection 1 of the section 18, input tax credit shall not be available in respect of the following, namely the motor vehicle for the transportation of the person having approved sitting capacity of not more than 13 person, mm, except when they are used for making the following taxable supplies, namely a further supply of such motor vehicle or the transportation of the passengers or imparting training on the driving such motor vehicles, the vessels and aircraft, except when they are used for making the following taxable supplies. Further supply of such a vessel or a aircraft or transportation of the passenger or impacting the training on navigating such vessels or impacting training on flying such aircraft for the transportation of the goods, service of general insurance, servicing, repairs and maintenance insofar as they relate to the motor vehicle, vessels or aircraft referred to in the Class A or Class EA, provided that the input tax rate in respect of such service shall be available where the motor vehicle or aircraft referred to in the Class A or Class A are used for the purpose specified therein, where were received by the taxable person engaged in the manufacture of such motor vehicle, vessels, or aircraft, or in the supply of general insurance services in respect of such motorcycle, vessels, or aircraft insured by him. The following supply of goods or services or both a food and beverage, outdoor catering, beauty treatment, health services, cosmetic and plastic surgery, leasing, renting, or hiring of motor vehicles, vessels, or aircraft referred to in Class A or Class B, except when used for the purpose specified therein. Life insurance and health insurance are provided that the input tax rate in respect of the such goods or services or both shall be available where an inward supply of such goods or services or both is used by the registered person for making an outward taxable supply of same category of goods or services or both or as the element of the taxable composite or mixed supply, the membership of the club, health and fitness centers, and the travel benefits extended to employees on vacation, such as leave or home travel concession, provided that input tax rate in respect of the such goods or services or both shall be available where it is obligatory for an employer to provide the same to the employee under any law for the time being in force. Work contract services when supplied for the concession of the immobile property other than the plant and machinery, except where it is yeah, an input services for the further supply of work contract services, goods or services or both received by the taxable person for the concession of immobile property other than the plant or machinery on his own account, including when such goods or services or both are used in the course of furtherance of business. Explanation for the purpose of Class A, C, and D. The expression, the construction includes the reconstruction, renovation, additions, or alterations, or repairs to the extent of capitalization to the said immovable property, the goods or services or both on which the tax has been paid under the section 10. The goods or services are both received by the non-resident taxable person except on goods imported by him. Goods or services are both received by the taxable person which are used or intended to be used for the activities relating to his obligations under the corporate the social responsibility referred to in the section 135 of the Companies Act 2013. Goods or services are both used for the personal consumption. Goods lost, stolen, destroyed, written off, or disposed of by the way of gift or free sample, and any tax paid in accordance with the provisions of the section 74, 129, and 130. This substituted for subsection 6. The government may prescribe the manner in which the credit referred to in the subsection 1 and 2 may be attributed. The explanation for the purpose of this chapter and chapter 6. The expression plant and machinery means apparatus, equipment, and machinery fixed to the earth by foundation or structural support that are used for making outward supply of goods or services, both and includes such a foundation and structural support, but excludes land, building, or any other civil structure. The telecommunication and towers and telecommunication towers. Mm, uh, Section 18, availment of credit in special circumstances. Subsection 1, subject to the such conditions and restrictions as may be prescribed, a person who has applied for the registration under this Act within 30 days from the date on which he becomes liable to the registration and has been granted for such a registration shall be entitled to take credit of input tax credit in respect of inputs held in stock and inputs contained in the semi-finished or finished goods held in stock on the day immediately preceding the date from which he becomes liable to pay tax under the provisions of this act. A person who takes the registration under subsection 3 of the section 25 shall be entitled to take credit of input tax in respect of inputs held in stock and inputs contained in the semi-finished or finished goods held in stock on the day immediately preceding the date of grant of the registration, where any registered person ceases to pay tax under the section 10, he shall be entitled to take credit of the input tax in respect of inputs held in stock, inputs contained in semi-finished or finished goods held in stock, and on the capital goods or the day immediately preceding the date from which he becomes liable to pay tax under the section 9, provided that the credit on the capital goods shall be reduced by such percentage point as may be prescribed, where an exempt supply of goods or services or both by the registered person becomes the taxable supply. Such a person shall be entitled to take credit of the input tax in respect of the inputs held in the stock and the inputs contained in the semi-finished or finished goods held in stock relatable to such exempt supply, and on capital goods exclusively used for such exempt supply on the day immediately preceding the date from which such supply becomes taxable, provided that the credit on the capital goods shall be reduced by such percentage point as may be prescribed. Subsection 2, a registered person shall not be entitled to take input tax credit under the subsection 1 in respect of any a supply of goods or services or both to him after the expiry of 1 year from the date of issue of the tax invoice relating to such supplies. The subsection 3, where there is a change in the constitution of the registered person on account of the sale, merger, demerger, amalgamation, lease, or transfer of business with the specific provisions for the transfer of the liabilities. The said registered person shall be allowed to transfer the input tax credit which remains unutilized in his electronic credit ledger to such as sold, merged, demerged, amalgamated, leased, or transferred business in such a manner as may be prescribed. Subsection 4, where any registered person who has availed of input tax rate opt to pay the tax under the section 10 or where the goods or services or both the supplied by him becomes wholly exempt, he shall pay an amount by way of debit in electronic credit ledger or electronic cash ledger, the equivalent to the credit of the input in respect of the inputs held in the stock and inputs contained in the semi-finished or finished goods held in the stock and on the capital goods reduced by such percentage point as may be prescribed on the day immediately preceding the date of exercising such option or as the case may be in the date of such exemptions, provided that after the payment of the such amount, the balance of input tax rate, if any, lying in his electronic credit ledger shall lapse. The subsection 5, the amount of credit under the subsection 1 and amount payable under the subsection 4 shall be calculated in such manner as may be prescribed. Subsection 6, in the case of the supply of goods or services, the plant or machinery on which the input tax rate has been taken, the registered person shall pay an amount equal to the input tax rate paid on the such capital goods or plant or machinery reduced by such percentage point as may be prescribed, or the tax on the transactions value of the such capital goods or plant or machinery determined under the section 15, whichever is higher. They provided that where the refinery bricks, molds, dies, jigs, fixtures are supplied as scrap, the taxable person may pay the tax on the transaction value of the such um, determined under the section 15, section 15, taking the input, section 19, taking the input tax rate in respect of inputs and capital goods sent for job work, the subsection 1, the principal shall subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be prescribed, be allowed input tax rate on the inputs send to the job worker for job work. The subsection 2, notwithstanding anything contained in the class B of the subsection 2 of the section 16, the principal shall be entitled to take rate of the input tax on the inputs, even if the inputs are directly sent to a job worker for the job work without being first brought to his place of business. Subsection 3, where the inputs sent for the job work are not received back by the principal after the completion of the job work, or otherwise, or are not supplied from the place of business of the job worker in accordance with the class A or class B of the subsection 1 of the section 143 within 1 year of being sent out, it shall be deemed that such inputs had been supplied by the principal to the job worker on the day when the said inputs were sent out. They provided way that where the inputs are sent directly to a job worker, the period of 1 year shall be counted from the date of receipt of the inputs by the job worker. The principal shall, subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be prescribed, be allowed input tax rate on the capital goods sent to the job worker for the job work. The subsection 5, notwithstanding anything contained in the class A, B, of the subsection 2 of the section 16, the principal shall be entitled to take rate of the input tax on the capital goods, even if the capital goods are directly sent to the job worker for the job work without being first brought to his place of business. The subsection 6, where the input capital goods sent for the job work are not received back by the principal within a period of 1 year, 3 years of being sent out, it shall be deemed that such capital goods has been supplied by the principal to the job worker on the day when the said capital goods were sent out. The provided that where the capital goods are sent directly to the job worker, the period of 3 years shall be counted counted from the date of the receipt of the capital goods by the job worker. Subsection 7, nothing contained in the subsection 3 or the subsection 6 shall apply to molds and dies, jigs and fixtures, or the tools sent out to the job worker for job work. The explanation for the purpose of this section, the a principle means the person referred to in the section 143. Section 20, in manner of distribution of credit by the input service distributor. The subsection 1, any office of the a supplier of the goods or services or both which receives tax invoice towards the receipt of the input services, including the invoice in respect of the services liable to tax under the subsection 3 or the subsection 4 of the section 9, for or on behalf of the distinct person referred to in the section 25, shall be required to be registered as an input service distributor under the a class 8 of the section 424, and shall distribute the input tax in respect of the such as invoices. The substitute for the input tax distributor shall distribute the credit of the central tax as a central tax or integrated tax, and the integrated tax as integrated tax, or the central tax by way of a document containing the amount of input tax be distributed in such a manner as may be prescribed. Subsection 2, the input tax credit distributor shall distribute the credit of the central tax or integrated tax charge on the invoice received by him, including the credit of the central or the integrated tax in respect of the services subject to levy of the tax under subsection 3 or the subsection 4 of the section 9, paid by the distinct person registered in the same state as the said input service distributor in such a manner within such a time and subject to such restrictions and conditions as may be prescribed. The input service distributor may distribute the credit subject to the following conditions, namely, the credit can be distributed to the recipients of the credit against a document containing such details as may be prescribed. The amount of credit distributed shall not exceed the amount of the credit available for the distribution. The credit of tax paid on the input services attributable to the recipients of the credit shall be distributed only to that recipients. The credit of the tax paid on the input services attributable to more than one recipient of this credit shall be distributed amongst such recipients to whom the input services is attributable, and such distribution shall be pro rata for on the basis of the turnover in the state or the turnover in the union territory of the such recipients during the relevant period to the aggregate of the turnover of the recipients to whom such input services is attributable and which are operational in the current year during the said relevant period. The credit of the tax paid on the input services attributable to all recipients of the credit shall be distributed amongst the such recipients, and such distribution shall be pro rata on the basis of the turnover in the state or the turnover in the union territory of the such recipients during the relevant period to the aggregate of the turnover of all the recipients and which are operational in the current year during the said relevant period. Subsection 3, the credit of the central tax shall be distributed as a central tax or integrated tax, and the integrated tax as integrated tax or the capital central tax by way of the issue of a document containing the amount of input tax credit in such a manner as may be prescribed. The relevant period shall be if the recipients of the credit have the turnover in the a state or union territory in the financial year preceding the year during which the credit is to be distributed, the said financial year, or if the sum or all the recipients of the credit do not have any turnover in their states or union territory in the financial year preceding the year during which the credit is to be distributed, the last quarter for which the details of the such turnover of the all the recipients are available previous to the month during which credit is to be distributed. The expression the recipients of the credit means the supplier of the goods or services are both having the same permanent account number as that of the input service distributor. The term turnover in relation to any registered person engaged in the supply of the taxable goods as may as well as the goods and the not taxable under this act means the value of the turnover including reduced by the amount of any duty or tax levied under this entries 84 and 92A of the list of the seventh schedule to the constitution, an entry of 51 and 54 of the list 2 of the said schedule the said schedule the manner of recovery of the credit distributed in excess the section 21 where the input service distributor distributes the credit in contravention of the provisions contained in the section 20 resulting in excess distribution of the credit to one or more the recipients of the credit. The excess credit so distributed shall be recovered from the such recipients along with interest and the provisions of the section 73 or 74 as the case may be. Shall the mutuous mundi apply for the determination of the amount to be recovered. The amount to be recovered. Registration section 22 to 30. Registration section 22, the person liable for registration subsection 1, every supplier shall be liable to be registered under this act in the state or union territory other than the special category state from where he shall makes a taxable supply of goods or services or both if his aggregate turnover in the financial year exceeds 20 lakhs rupees, provided that where such a person makes taxable supplies of goods or services or both from any of the category a special category states he shall be liable to be registered if his aggregate turnover in the financial year exceeds 10 lakhs rupees, provided further that the government may at the request of the special category state and on recommendation of the council enhance the aggregate turnover referred to in the first provision from 10 lakhs rupees to such amount not exceeding 20 lakhs rupees and subject to such conditions and limitations as may be so notified. Provided also that the government may, at the request of the state and on the recommendation of the council, enhance the aggregate turnover from 20 lakhs rupees to such amount not exceeding 40 lakhs rupees in the case of the supplier who is engaged exclusively in supply of goods subject to such conditions and limitations as may be notified. Explanation for the purpose of this subsection a person shall be considered to be engaged is exclusively in supply of goods even if he is engaged in the exempt supply of the services provided by way of extending the deposits loans or advances in so far as the consideration is represented by way of interest or discount. The in subsection 2, every registered person who on the day immediately preceding the appointed day is registered or holds a license under an existing law shall be liable to be registered under this act with effect from the appointed day. Subsection 3, where a business carried on by the taxable person registered under this act is transferred whether on account of the succession or otherwise to another person as a going concern. The transferee or the transferor successor as the case may be he shall be liable to be registered and with effect from the date of the such transfer of the succession. Subsection 4, notwithstanding anything contained in the subsection 2 1 and 3 In the case of the transfer present to the sanction of the scheme or an arrangement for the amalgamation, or as the case may be, a demerger, the of two or more the companies present to an order of the High Court tribunal, or otherwise the transferee shall be liable to be registered with effect from the date on which the registered of the register of companies issues a certificate of incorporation giving effect to such order of the High Court or tribunal. The explanation for the purpose of this section, the explanation aggregate turnover shall include all supplies made by the taxable person, whether on his own account or made on the behalf of all his principals, where the supply of goods after the completion of the job work by the registered job worker shall be treated as the case supply of goods by the principal referred to in the section 143A, and the value of the such goods shall not be included in the aggregate turnover of the registered job worker. Uh, the expression special category states shall mean the states as specified in the subclass G A of the class 4 of this Article 279A of the Constitution, except the state of Jammu and Kashmir and Jammu and Kashmir. The person not liable for registration. The section 23 is subsection 1. The following person shall not be liable to be registered, namely any person engaged exclusively in the business of supplying goods or fitting services, or both, but that are not liable to tax or wholly exempt from the tax under this act, or under the Integrated Goods and Service Tax Act. An agriculturalist, to the extent of the supply of the produce out of the cultivation of land. Subsection 2, notwithstanding anything to the contrary contained in the subsection 1 of section 22 or 24, the government may, on the recommendation of the council, to the council by notification, subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be specified. They of specify the category of the person who may be exempted from the obtaining the registration under this act. The government may, on the recommendation of the council by the notification, specify the category of person who may be exempted from the obtaining registration under this act. The compulsory registration in certain cases. The section 24, notwithstanding anything contained in the subsection 1 and of the section 22, the following categories of persons shall be required to be registered under this act. The person making any interstate taxable supply, the casual taxable person making the taxable supply, person who are required to pay tax under the reverse charge, the person who are required to pay tax under the subsection 5 of the section 9, the non-resident the taxable person making the taxable supply, the person who are required to deduct tax under the section 51, whether or not separately registered under this act. The person who makes the taxable supply of goods or services, or both, on behalf of the other taxable person, whether as an agent or otherwise input service distributor, whether or not separately registered under this act. The person who supplies goods or services, both, other than the supplies specified under the subsection 5 of the section 9, through such electronic commerce operator who is required to collect tax at source under the section 52. Um, every electronic commerce operator who is required to collect the tax at source under the section 52. Every person supplying online information and data base the access or retrieval the services from the place outside India to the person in India, other than the registered person, the registered person, every person supplying online money gaming from the place outside India to the place in India,
such other person or class of person as may be notified by the government on the recommendation of the council. On the recommendation of the council, the procedure for registration subsection 1 every person who is liable to be registered under section 22 or 24 shall apply for the registration in every such state or union territory in which he is so liable within 15 days 30 days from the date on which he becomes liable to the registration in such a manner and such subject to such condition as may be prescribed, provided that the casual taxable person or the non-resident taxable person shall apply for the registration at least 5 days period to the commencement of the business. Provided further that the person having a unit as defined in the Special Economic Zone Act 2005 in the Special Economic Zone or being a Special Economic Zone developer shall have to apply for the separate registration as a distinct person from his place of business located outside the special economic zone in such a same state or union territory. Explanation: every person who makes a supply from the territorial water of India shall obtain the registration in the coastal state or union territory where the nearest point of the appropriate base line is located. Subsection 2 a person seeking registration under this act shall be granted a single registration in the state or union territory provided that the person having the multiple place of business in a state or union territory may be granted a separate registration for each such place of business subject to such conditions as may be prescribed. Substituted for provided that the person having multiple place business verticals in omitted this is the subsection 3 the person not liable to be registered under the section 22 or 24 may be may get himself registered voluntarily, and all the provisions of this act are as are applicable to the registered person shall apply to such a person. The subsection 4 the person who has obtained or is required to obtain more than one registration, whether in one state or union territory or the more than one state or union territory, shall, in respect of each such registration, be treated as a distinct person for the purpose of this act. The is subsection 5 where a registered person who has obtained or is required to obtain the registration in a state or union territory in respect of establishment has an establishment in another state or union territory, then such establishment shall be treated as an establishment of the distinct person for the purpose of this act. The in subsection 6 every person shall have a permanent account number issued under the Income Tax Act 1961 in order to be eligible for the grant of registration, provided that the person required to deduct tax under the section 51 may have in lieu of the permanent account number a tax deductions and the collection account number issued under the said act in order to be eligible for the grant of registration. The is subsection 6a every registered person shall undergo the authentication or furnish the proof of the possession of the Aadhaar number in such form and manner and within such a time as may be prescribed, provided that if the registered Aadhaar number is not assigned to the registered person, and such a person shall be offered alternate and viable means of identification in such a manner as the government may, on the recommendation of the council, prescribes, provided further that in a case of failure to undergo authentication or furnish the proof of the provisions possession of the other number or furnish the alternate and viable means of identification, registration allotted to such a person shall be deemed to be invalid, and the other person other provisions of this act shall apply as if such a person does not have a registration. The Subsection 6b on and from the date of notification, every individual shall, in order to be eligible for the registration grant of registration, undergo authentication or furnish the proof of possession of Aadhaar number in such a manner as the government may, on the recommendation of the council, specify in the said notification, provided that if the Aadhaar number is not assigned to an individual, such individual shall be offered alternate and viable means of identification in such a manner as the government may, on the recommendation of the council, specify in the said notification. The subsection 6c, subsection 6c, the subsection 6d, and subsection 7, notwithstanding anything contained in the subsection 6. Non-resident taxable person shall may be granted registration under subsection 1 on the basis of such other documents as may be prescribed. Subsection 8, where the person who is liable to be registered under the Act fails to obtain the registration, the proper officer may, on without prejudice to any action which may be taken under this Act or under any other law for the time being in force, proceed to the register such a person in such manner as may be prescribed. Subsection 9, notwithstanding anything contained in the subsection 1, for any specialized agency of the union, national organization or multilateral financial institution, and the organization notified under the union, the national United Nations, the Privilege and Immunities Act 1947, the any other person or class of person as may be is notified by the commissioner shall be granted a unique identity number in such a manner and for such a purpose, including the refund of taxes on the notified suppliers of the goods or services or both received by them, the as may be prescribed. Subsection 10, the registration or the unique identity number shall be granted on or rejected after the due verification in such a manner and within such a period as may be prescribed. Subsection level, the certificate of registration shall be issued in such a form and with effect from such a date as may be prescribed. Subsection 12, the registration or unique identity number shall be deemed to have been granted after the expiry of the period prescribed under the subsection 10, if no deficiency has been communicated to the applicant within that period. Uh, Deemed registration section 26, section 26 deals with deemed registration. The deemed subsection 1, the grant of the registration or the unique identity number under the state goods or and Service Tax Act or the Union Territory Goods and Service Tax Act shall be deemed to be granted a grant of registration or unique identity number under this act, subject to the condition that the application or for the registration or unique identity number has not been rejected under this act within the time specified in the subsection 10 of the section 25. Subsection 2, notwithstanding anything contained in the subsection 10 of the section 25, any rejection of application for the registration of or unique identity number under the State Goods and Service Tax Act or Union Territory Goods and Service Tax Act shall be deemed to be the rejection of the application for the registration under this act. The a special provisions as the section 27, special provision relating to the casual taxable person and non-resident taxable person, they is subsection 1, the certificate of registration issued to the casual taxable person or the non-resident taxable person shall be valid for the period specified in the application for the registration or 90 days from the effective date of the registration, whichever is earlier, and such the person shall make the taxable person supplies only after the issue of the certificate of registration, provided that the a proper officer may, on the sufficient cause been shown by the said taxable person, extend the said period of 90 days by further period not exceeding 30 days, 90 days. The subsection 2, the subsection 2, the casual taxable person or the non-resident taxable person shall, at the time of the submission of the application for the registration under the subsection 1 of the section 25, make an advance deposit of the tax in amount equivalent to the estimated tax liability of such a person for the period for which the registration is sought, provided that where any extension of the time is sought under the subsection 1 shall such a person, the taxable person shall deposit an additional amount or to tax equivalent to the estimated tax liability of the such person for the period for which the extension is sought. The subsection 3 the amount deposited under subsection 2 shall be credited to the electronic cash ledger of the such person and shall be utilized in the manner provided under the section 49. Section 28 amendment of registration, the subsection 1, every registered person and the person whom unique identity number has been assigned shall inform the proper officer of any change in the information furnished at the time of registration or the subsequent day of in such a form and manner and within such period as may be prescribed. Subsection 2 the proper officer may on the basis of information furnished under this subsection 1 or as ascertained by him approve or reject amendment in the registration particulars in such manner and within such the period as may be prescribed, provided that the approval of the proper officer shall not be required in respect of the amendment of such particulars as may be prescribed, provided further that the proper officer shall not reject the application for the amendment in the registration particulars without giving the person an opportunity of being heard. Subsection 3 any rejection or approval of the amendment under the State Goods and Service Tax Act or Union Territory Goods and Service Tax Act, as the case may be, shall be deemed to be the rejection or approval under this act. The approval under this act, the cancellation, section 29, cancellation or suspension of a registration, subsection 1. The proper officer may either on his own motion or on an application filed by the registered person or by his legal hire in the case of death of the such a person, cancel the registration in such a manner and within such a period as may be prescribed, having regard to circumstances where the business has been discontinued, transferred fully for any reason, including the death of the proprietor, amalgamated with the other legal entity, demerged or otherwise disposed of, or where there is any change in the constitution of the business, or the taxable person is no longer liable to be registered under the section 22 or 24, or intend to be opt out of registration voluntarily made under the subsection 3 of the section 25, provided that during the pendency of the proceedings relating to the cancellation of the registration filled by the registered person, the registration may be suspended for such period and in such a manner as may be prescribed. The subsection 2, the proper officer may cancel the registration of the person from the date, such date including any retrospective date as may deem fit, where a registered person has contributed such a provision of the act or rules made thereunder as may be prescribed, or the person paying the tax under this section 10 has not furnished the return for the financial year beyond 3 months from the due date of the furnishing the said return. The any registered person other than the person specified in the class B has not furnished the returns or the such the continuous tax period as may be prescribed. Any person who has taken voluntary registration under subsection 3 of the section 25 has not commenced the business within 6 months from the date of registration, or the registration has been obtained by the means of fraud, willful misstatement, or suppression of facts, for the provided for that the proper officer shall not cancel the registration without giving the person an opportunity of being heard. They provided further that during the pendency of the proceedings relating to the cancellation of the registration, the proper officer may suspend the registration for such a period in such a manner and such as may be prescribed. Subsection 3. The cancellation of registration under this act shall not affect the liability of the person to pay tax and other dues under this act, or to discharge any obligation under this act, or the rules made the under for any period to the date of cancellation, whether or not such the tax and other dues are determined before or after the date of cancellation. Subsection 4. The cancellation of the registration under this State Goods and Service Tax Act or Union Territory Goods and Service Tax Act, as the case may be, they shall be deemed to be the cancellation of the registration of this under this act. The Subsection 5. Every registered person whose the registration is cancelled shall pay an amount by way of debit in the electronic credit ledger or electronic cash ledger equivalent to the credit of input tax rate in respect of the inputs held in the stock and inputs contained in the semi-finished or finished goods held in the stock, or capital goods or plant and machinery on the day immediately preceding the day 8 of such cancellation, or the output tax liable payable on such goods whichever is higher, calculated in such a manner as may be prescribed, provided that in the case of capital goods or the plant and machinery, the taxable person shall pay an amount equal to the input tax rate taken on the said capital goods, the all plant and machinery reduced by such a percentage point as may be prescribed, or the tax on the transaction, value of the such capital goods or plant and machinery under the section 15, whichever is higher. This subsection 6, the amount payable under the subsection 5 shall be calculated in such a manner as may be prescribed. The revocation of the cancellation of registration section 30 is subsection 1, subject to such condition as may be prescribed. Any registered person whose the registration is cancelled by the proper officer on his own motion may apply to such officer for revocation of the cancellation of the registration in such a manner within the time and subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be prescribed, provided that the such period may on the inserted the prescribed manner within 30 days from the date of service of the cancellation order. Vivid section 141 of the subsection 2. The proper officer may in such a manner and within such a period as may be prescribed by the order either revoke the cancellation of the registration or reject the cancellation. Reject the application, provided that the application for revocation of the cancellation of the registration shall not be rejected unless the applicant has been given an opportunity or been heard. Subsection 3, the revocation of the cancellation of the registration under the State Goods and Service Tax Act or Union Territory Goods and Services Act, as the case may be, it shall be deemed to be a revocation of the cancellation of the registration under this act. The